Past players, past legends, past legends.
Tonight, we welcome Tim Weatherald. Got to admit, Tim's a pretty special person in my life as a mentor and friend for a large number of years. So Weathers, 253 games for Sturt, 66 for Nord, 311 overall. Playing at Sturt in terms of the premiership side, obviously in 2002, won the Beau Morton medal in 02, runner-up 3 times, 98, 99, 01. Of course, the Marjorie Wisheeds in 2002, advertised the Team of the Year, 98, 99, 2000, 2002. Play-life member at Sturt. Then he ended up coming over to Nord, came third in the BNF, runner-up in the BNF in 09, played in the grand final in 10. His 300th game, we will get to that. Pretty emotional day down at Alberton. But welcome aboard, Weathers. Privileged to have you on board, mate.
Cheers, mate. Thanks very much. It's always great to sort of, you obviously talk to people about your footy. It sort of seems like a long time ago now, but just hearing you read that stuff out now, it's interesting to hear back.
Mate, 300 games is fantastic, but we've got to go back to the start, mate. Where did you start your junior career? Where did you play at?
I was a Adelaide Hills boy playing for the Bridgewater Raiders up in the Adelaide Hills there. So, I grew up in Bridgewater. And
in fact, we could even go back earlier than that, Pete.
I have heard a bit of a story about this.
No, Tim, playing career started at Bridgewater, that's for sure.
But he was mascot for Adelaide University. And, of course, Adelaide University famous for every person having their own individual number. So Tim was a half, and then he'd grown. As we know, Tim's an extraordinary tall human being. He'd grown that by next year, so his mum made it. He was 3/4 for next year.
Yeah, true story. Mum knitted me the great black and white jumper when on my first year there as the mascot, and had a half on the back. And then the next year when Dad was coaching the A-grade boys era, I still remember those days as a young kid, as I'm sure you do, Malky. Down at the pub and hold your bowlies and all those sort of things. And it was a great way to grow up as a kid. So I was always going to end up in footy somehow. But they were some of my earliest memories of football. Is definitely at Adelaide Uni. But then obviously the playing started up at Bridgewater. There, Dad always tells a story that I think you had to be 8 to play footy. I think it was something along those lines. And I was 4, I think. So I went down to my first training, and the coach said, "Oh, how old are you?" Dad told me to tell you I was 8. And so he said, "All right, I'll believe you, Dad." So I ended up playing, I think it was 4-year-old in the under-8s when I wasn't old enough. But, I had some great memories playing up there. And, probably started, on the 8s all the way through to see junior colts there. And then I ventured down to PAC as a student and sort of started playing school footy there. And obviously living in the Adelaide Hills is a very strong Sturt zone. And so my pathway really did lead to Sturt, and sort of that's how I ended up there.
Did you barrack for Sturt as a young fella?
Yeah, no, definitely was a Sturt boy. Obviously living in the Adelaide Hills, I also had a bit of a soft spot for Norwood. My grandpa played one or two games out there, and so there was a little bit of a connection there. And a guy called Richard Anderson, who probably not the greatest known Norwood footballer, but through the university days, Dad sort of coached him, and I think like a lot of people when you're growing up, if you know someone playing footy or playing at any area, it gives you that bit of extra interest. So I remember Richard Anderson playing as a little kid, and he was playing for Nord, and so Sturt supported, but always had a little bit of a soft spot for Nord as well.
And how did Sturt get onto you? Was it just through one of their recruiting drives, or did they identify you and get you out to an open practice session?
I think it's purely through the old pathways those days. I think, being Adelaide Hills, Bridgewater kid, Sturt was our local zone. So I started down in the under-13s. They had the old special squads, they used to call them. So the under-13s and 14s and 15s. And, so I just sort of, started that pathway initially, probably through Bridgewater, probably nominated me, I suppose, as a kid. And I won the male medal up in the Adelaide Hills in the old junior colts in the early days. And so probably identified maybe through that way, through the hills. And but then, went through the 14s, 15s, and, the real stuff started under 17 level back then. And then obviously with the school footy like it still is now today. I sort of ended up playing first 18 for a few years at Sturt. PAC. And then my first year out of school, I was still only 17. I was a young sort of year 12. Started off in the senior colts or under 19s at Sturt, and I think I played about the first 6 games in the under 19s, and I sort of progressed up into the reserves. Played about 10 games of reserves. This was 1995, and I played my first game against South Adelaide down at Noarlunga, the first league game, and ended up playing the last 5 games of 1995, which is where the sort of career started.
Yeah. So from there, where Weathers, you established yourself pretty quick, really. That you came through. By the way, I'm not surprised that Mick did use that line to say that you're under. That doesn't surprise me whatsoever. From there, though, Weathers, so you established yourself pretty quick, and you really then were just a consistent player for Sturt there for a long time. Just bang, consistent performance. And of course, Sturt went through some hard times, some real hard times, and it looked like the doors were going to be closed at one stage, and it was really within a bee's dick of being closed.
Were the players aware of that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think my first year, that 1995 season, that was the year we didn't win a game as a club. And obviously, being I was only sort of 17-year-old kid. Like, I was so thrilled to be playing league football. I guess that excitement probably, hid those sort of overall results. Like, as a kid, you're just trying to find your place at that stage. And so 95, didn't win a game, and then obviously this was sort of when Phil Carminer just came in, and I think from my point of view, Phil really he stuck with a core group of players, and we had a really good group of some senior players, and your Bruce Lennons and your Chris Threadgolds at that stage, and over the coming years, Phil believed in us, and he got some amazing recruits, and Damien Squire came across, and Brodie Atkinson came across, who two of my greatest mentors through my period there, and then you had, Dean Woosnam came across, and, we managed to get some really good players from other clubs as well, who were probably near, half towards maybe the end of their careers. And then, Phil stuck with us. And, I definitely do remember those days when, the back of the advertiser, they had pictures of Sturt and Nord and, trying to pick a team from those for the AFL when that was the rumour at that stage coming into the AFL. And then obviously the possibility of Sturt folding, and then, again, combining with Nord in the SANFL, and I was definitely played in your mind. And one of my greatest mates, Ben Nelson, I mean, always obviously his old man Sandy had a lot to do with the, for his era, that group of guys through that era really did stand up, and they probably showed the way, I think, and led the way in making sure that we didn't fold. And I think the Sturt Footy Club got a lot to thank from that core group of players through that time.
Also, we better add too that at one stage it looked like cricket could have been the go. Weathers could seriously bowl a leg break. They turned a bloody long way, and his dad was a very good leggy as well. And state junior sides with Bass and Simon Goodwin. Cricket was a distinct possibility at one stage.
Oh, it was probably probably my number one sport, to be honest, until I was probably 20, or maybe not 20, but through junior grades. I played in the old state Tapstry as a footy side, but then, didn't make another state footy side after that. And, cricket was, I sort of played, stayed under 12, stayed under 17s for 2 years, stayed under 19s, played a second 11 game. I guess my pathway was definitely looking down the cricket way. And I think like in those days, cricket and footy were the two sports for a lot of guys. And obviously you mentioned Nathan Bassett, and we played stayed under 19s together. And, Simon Goodwin was a little left arm opening bowler. He was smaller than me in those days. And, so we had some good sort of, guys who just love playing sport. And I guess back those days, there probably weren't the opportunities in cricket that there are these days. And the way I looked at things back then, I think there was, say, 45 players on an AFL list. There was, I think 14 or 15 teams, whereas cricket, you basically had to be in the best 11 in the state to really, play at that, that top level. And to me, it was probably a numbers game in the end. I sort of thought I had more opportunities through football. And, I was still playing a bit of A-grade cricket when I was playing league football. And I think it got to that stage where I think the grand final for cricket was the first round of SANFL footy, and it just didn't make sense to play a full season and then have to then choose not to play in a grand final or miss a league game. And so at the end of '95, when I just made my league, sort of started playing league footy, cricket was, love cricket, still love my cricket. But I think the opportunities to me at that stage looked better in footy, so that was probably what the decision came.
Who are you watching in the cricket these days, mate? Who's the player that gets you up off the couch and jumping up and down for joy when they're going well?
I think a young lad called Jake Weatherald. There's a little Jakey, he's a young Darwin lad. So he's my dad's brother's son, and so obviously Jake's a Darwin lad, and he came down and boarded at PAC when I was teaching there, and I've obviously followed his career really closely. Being obviously, a cousin and family member. It's me and my whole family love going to watch him play in the Big Bash League, and obviously through the Redbacks through those periods.
I can honestly say, Pete, so I've gone to a Shield game and South Australia fielding, and I am just pissing myself laughing because Jake was fielding square leg, and the ridiculous mannerisms to say that Jake and Tim are identical is ridiculous. And it was just like watching a junior Tim out there. And it was, and it's funny when Tim mentioned Simon Goodwin, because back then you had Tim's dad, Simon's dad Terry, and Weather's dad both playing for Payneham.
Yes,
and they were the old days in terms of, you're in the bar afterwards, and let's be honest, if Mick took wickets, he would quite often be the last person there. And we used to joke that we'd go around and change muck around with Mick's car to adjust the bolts and all that, so that Tim could drive home. It was a bit of a standard joke, but So you actually spent a lot of time with Goody as kids, didn't you?
Yeah, no, definitely. And then we both sort of started our. He played cricket at Sturt as well, in all those under 14s and 16s, and our footy never really crossed paths. The Simon Goodwin story is an amazing story, which is obviously amazing that he was a cricketer as well, and he sort of
he could bowl
the Crows, and he just grew late, and But no, we started our university as teachers together down at Underdale. I used to drive to Simon's house on a daily basis. We catch he'd drive me down to uni, and spent a lot of time with Simon through those sort of late teenage, early 20s, and I've run into Simon a few times, and he's a great fella, and
he hasn't
great
changed.
To see the success he's had as well, we as we mentioned earlier. We definitely grew up, around Payneham Cricket Club and with the parents knowing each other, and so nuts. Definitely still love the cricket. I still go to every test match I can get myself to, and obviously footy was my pathway, and I've got no regrets with the decisions I made, and I look back and really really pleased what happened in my footy.
So moving on, obviously with the footy, you made the 1989 state Sapsaza team?
That was a amazing sort of I guess my first and only ever state footy team I ever made, of all things. But it had some good players there. Little Michael O'Loughlin was in that team, and he was he was a funny little fella back those days. He was probably the player who went on to do amazing things. We went to Wollongong, and we ended up winning the Australian Championship. So that was a great memory, and some great memories from that. And obviously, really, I mean, only from a personal point of view, I had 4 daughters in the end, and my young twin girls just got selected in the state under 12 girls team last week. So I guess it's done full circle, and now my little 2 will get to go and do the same thing, hopefully.
Absolutely.
So, then with Weather, so you moved on with Sturt, keep going, and then we get to the 99, and geez, the so nearly, but an under fabulous Phil, and it's really interesting with Phil. Like, let's be honest, he's been a journeyman in his footy career. Changed clubs often due to his actions and all that. But it's interesting that he considers himself a Sturt person, which I think it's a pretty big tick to Sturt in that day and what then developed from that era, and 99 was so close, mate.
Yeah, no, I mean, as I said, my career started with Phil, and my first 7 years were with Phil Carman, and I could never ever speak more highly of what Phil did for me and for the footy club. Like, some funny stories, like stories which is just Phil Carman stories, and he was just. I personally probably didn't really understand how much of a superstar he was, and until one sort of pre-season we went over to Collingwood, and he took us to, obviously Victoria Park over there, and we've walked in there, and these current players and old board members just looked at Phil Carman, and his name was on the wall, and just the way that they spoke about him over there, it was just amazing to see. Over in Melbourne, how highly regarded he was, and but I mean, many of you would have heard, and last year he was the guest of the SANFL at that luncheon, and he spoke so highly of Sturt in that time, and that was, I'm sure that's what you're referring to, Malky, when he thinks back to his career, his time at Sturt's probably one of his best memories of the time he spent, and of the friends and mates he made out of that time.
And look, as a player, I will still say Carman is the only person that I consider the equal of Robber and pure ability, but white line fever ruined that. So that shows how highly that, obviously I saw him as Nord as a kid and all that as well. And back then, then too, Carman, Robert Odie and Neil Craig used to train up at the hockey oval at Parkinson up the top when I scored for Kenzie as a kid. And they've often said that Carman and Craig were the two fittest footballers in the country. So Carman, when he went to Collingwood, said about coming over to Collingwood, he's gone, well, it's not as professional as Nord.
Yep.
So, people just didn't that blew people away.
Well, when you talk to anyone who played for Sturt during the Carman period, probably the greatest memories, or maybe not the greatest memories, was the Friday morning run. So he was the head of security at St. Peter's College. So we'd meet at Phil's house at 6:15 every Friday morning during pre-season and even during season sometimes, and we'd race from his house down the little lane behind St. Peter's.
Yep.
We'd hit the Torrens. We'd race down to the Weir. It's about just under 5Ks, I think it was, and it was like we'd race. She was flat out, and I reckon for my first 2 years, Phil beat everyone.
Yeah.
We're talking, guys coming off AFL lists, and Phil was running fast, and we were trying to beat him. Don't worry.
He was amazing.
He was, and I ended up beating him. I think he had a knackered knee, nothing about me, but I ended up. I ran behind him this day, and I sort of, just as you come past the little par 3 golf course, I sort of snuck past him, and I ran across the bridge. So I beat him for the first time, and I was pretty proud of myself. I've just got over past that line there, and Phil's come up behind me. He's grabbed me. I was only 18 at the time, young kid. He's grabbed me around the throat and thrown me up against the fence and whacked me in the guts and called me a little prick and a few other expletives, which you can imagine what Phil said.
Yes.
And warned me never to ever run behind him again and beat him in a race like that.
Interesting.
So then we run the 5Ks back to Phil's house. So it was 10Ks every Friday we do. So then the next week, we take off again, running down this lane, and I was trying to run past Phil at the start, and he started to kick me, and he started to throw his arms around and whack me, and he wouldn't let me get me past this time. But no, he was an amazing athlete. Like, he was.
Well, they reckon that he could have decathlete medalled in the decathlon. Like, he held athletic records at Pembroke for 30-odd years. So he was incredible.
He still talks. No, as I said, referring back to last year when he spoke to us all, I think last year he broke the world record for an indoor ergo, or there's something online. So he's still an exceptionally fit man now. But the Phil Carman era was amazing, and it was actually 98. The year you're referring to, Malky, where we only lost 4 games for the whole year, and it was those early days when Port Adelaide they snuck through into the 5 that year. Their AFL players, I think they only had to play 3 games to qualify back those days. It was 3 games, And so your Brett Chalmers, some young Burgoynes, came back into their side, and I think they made 5th on percentage and ended up coming through from 5th to make the grand final, and we'd beaten them all year, but they ended up knocking us off in the grand final. But that was the year which we probably should have won. Then you sort of flip through to 02 where we hadn't beaten Centrals all year. It's quite a remarkable year. Like ourselves, Sturt, Nord, and Centrals were the three best sides, beat everyone else easily, but Centrals couldn't beat Nord couldn't beat Sturt, and Sturt couldn't beat Centrals throughout the minor round. And so it got to the grand final, and we were definitely the major underdogs. I think we'd lost to them 4 times, Centrals, during that season. And, so obviously 98 we probably should have won, and then 02 where we were the underdogs, we did win. So would love to have won a couple of grand finals, but to win that one in 02 was amazing. And
pretty special under Sticks' influence in that year, mate. And Sticks had come from uni, so obviously it had a bit to do with Sticks in that regard.
Yeah. No, yes, obviously that was Phil had sort of moved on, and we had a sort of tough finish to the year before, and Brenton came in, and Sticko was he probably just Phil had gotten us so far, and just through pure effort and just inspiring us, and Sticks just added a little bit of structure and just a couple of those little things on the outside the edges, and he was great, obviously, to work with us that year, and it was an amazing feeling to win that grand final.
Obviously, went through the tough times early on with a couple of wooden spoons there, and to make a grand final and just get pipped by Port Adelaide, and then go on in 2002 and taste the ultimate glory. Was it definitely the highlight of your career to that stage? I mean, obviously everyone plays for a premiership, but are there special moments along the way that you remember that sort of culminate in that grand final victory?
Yeah, I mean, nothing compares to that moment when the siren went that year, and nothing before, nothing since. Sporting-wise, I should say, I better not mention anything about family and having babies, but
yes.
It was pretty.
Well, we'll get to that. We'll get back to. We'll get to your text message.
It was pretty special, but I mean, throughout the career, I mean, the first game's always an amazing thing.
Yep.
I was a young kid growing up in the SANFL, and to play a league game was just extraordinary for me. And so that memory of that first game down at Noarlunga, and I remember my first mark, and someone from, I can't remember who it was, from South came and knocked me over, and Andrew Geddes, who's one of those great guys through that period, he went and just whacked him for me and said, "Don't you touch that little fella again." And he probably did that for the next 10 years for me. But it was just that first game was very special. The first win, we beat West Adelaide the following year, which I think, I can't remember the actual number of games we'd lost in a row. I think it was in the 30s or 40s.
Yeah, I thought it was in the 30s. Yeah.
Yeah, we beat West Adelaide at Adelaide Oval, and that was a great memory. Then there's milestone games. Is the first final you play in, and I think, but nothing compares to that grand final. So a late one, which I'm sure you remember, rulebook. Probably one of the greatest memories late in my career was, as a team, was winning the prelim final versus the Eagles for Nord in my second to last game, when we were out of the game. We're probably
we were gone.
Yeah, gone, and Nick Dygan stuck that goal in late, and that was a marvellous moment for me late in my career to win that one, to give myself another chance at the grand final the following week. But the milestones, 100, 200, 300 were amazing games, but like that grand final, nothing compares.
Okay, Tim, now onto the really serious side of it. With Bali, I think we all, from back here, all thought, oh, geez, that's terrible, and all that. But for me, it was almost like a light bulb. It was smashing. Watching you run to Julie at the airport, obviously knowing the two of you and knowing Julie for 40-odd years and all that, that really smashed home to me about it. And then I unusually for me, hesitated for a long time. And we were doing an Auskick thing at Prince's. I could virtually go and find the blade of grass where I asked you. And I was really nervous asking you, can I ask you about Bali? And your response, your exact words were, "Please do, Malcolm. I've been encouraged to talk about it." And Yeah, so then we started, and you said you'd written a book. I then went and got it in our break. I'd read it that night. And, yeah, the whole Bali bit, just unfathomable. We all agree, but that we spoke about it so much. And
so we'll fill in some of our listeners that may not be aware of obviously the Bali bombings in 2002. Yep. Sturt were obviously there on their end-of-season trip. Is that right, Weathers?
Yeah, true. So it was literally won the grand final on the Sunday, and obviously being a school teacher, I partied most of that week, and we headed off to Bali on that Friday night, arrived sort of early on the Saturday morning. So what's that? Sort of 5.5, 6 days later, and then the bombings. There was 20 of us inside the Surrey Club on that night, 6 days later after the grand final. So yeah, she was the shortest celebration of a premiership ever, I think. But but I think as you touched base on, I think there, Malcolm, in regards to, obviously 9/11 had occurred, probably the first really big, terrorist attack, and, obviously massive, hard to fathom then, but back in Australia, you probably didn't really know people, whereas as you said, I think Bali, for Australians, people had been there all the time or knew someone, or I think it was so much closer to home in regards to that, is probably why it had such a big impact on people in Australia. And that's as last year was the 20 years since that had happened, and it was obviously a horrible moment in our lives, and the footy club was, I've said this from the start, probably the way I got through it was I was so lucky to have so many people who came through with me from Sturt, and then the support of a footy club. I hate to think of those people who were over there with just one or two friends and came back by themselves. So I was lucky, as were all the Sturt boys who came back, to have so many great people, and not just Sturt, but the SANFL, who supported us. And yeah, it's obviously sad. Nothing will ever compare, and you never forget it. But yeah, we've all sort of had lives since then, and yeah, it's a really horrible memory which we go back to, but that's part of our history.
But also with that, Pete, that Mocha Dunstan said, because Josh Deegan's body got found just as Sturt were about to land, and said, look, we've got to get someone to speak. Mm-hmm. And Tim put up his hand to speak. Now, we can sit here and debate over who's a good captain, who's a good coach. Yep. It's all bullshit. Where Tim displayed life and death leadership.
Yep.
And,
she was. It was one of those things that when we flew back into Adelaide, a couple of days after it all, and I think I'd been in the media. I'd sort of obviously just won the Magarey medal as well, and I guess I was sort of in the media a little bit, and it was a pretty traumatic time, and I guess I was the person. I mean, I was only 24, 25 at that stage, and probably one of the most senior players on the trip. We were all pretty young kids, and I guess that was I took on that role of trying to, I wanted people back in Australia to know what had happened. I guess that was the thing, and still do want people to know, and so it's never forgotten. And it was horrible, tough period, but I think we all helped each other through, and we still do nowadays.
Was it a case of absolute chaos? Obviously, trying to get information, and friends, family trying to get in contact. Was it a state of chaos for you guys?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, as I said, we'd only arrived that morning, so the Saturday morning with the old Bali overnight flight sort of thing, as you've all heard about, and as I said, we're all young kids. No, I think of our group of 20, maybe one or two blokes had a phone. So there wasn't the technology you had today, and didn't really know Bali at all. I'd never travelled there by myself. I don't think anyone in our group had ever been there. And you're obviously in the middle of a nightclub, and when the bomb went off, we all pretty much got separated because we're sort of in different places of the bar. And I somehow managed to get out the front of the bar. Some guys went out the back, and I ended up back at our motel, ironically, which was lucky for me. And another player was back there at the time, and his story is an amazing story. He left the place probably half an hour before the bomb went off, feeling sick, and he was in the second level of our motel room. And when the bomb went off, he hit the roof, and all the windows came flying in. As just to describe, I suppose, the power of the bomb. That was sort of from maybe 500 meters away from it. So I ended up back at the motel, and the night was pretty much spent just sitting in the foyer, trying to ring people back in Australia.
Yep.
You mentioned Graham Dunstan. Like, I rang my father, Mickey, back in Adelaide, probably, I don't know how long after the bomb went off. I still reckon he was probably one of the first people in Australia who ever even heard about it. He then rang Mocker and those two guys back in Adelaide, along with lots of other families, sort of, phone calls over the next sort of 10, 12 hours. We sat there ticking names off as we heard. Some blokes were stuck down on the beach. Some blokes ended up at the airport. Some guys called us from random motels around Bali. And, I guess by about 6 o'clock the next morning, we'd sort of, ticked off where most guys were. We knew Julian Burton had been badly burnt, was in hospital. We didn't know where Josh and we didn't know where Bobby were. And so it was one of those, like, do we want to get out of here? How do we get home? Ringing consulates, just had no idea what to do. Like, it was just as you said, utter chaos. All the local people wanting to come in and see what had happened. All the people who were involved were trying to escape, and so it was just a backlog of people, and you literally couldn't move.
It's an incredible story, really.
Yeah, it's still mind-boggling.
Obviously, Sturt being the wonderful club that they are, they obviously would have helped you guys out with counselling and support during that time. Any comment on how they handled it?
No, definitely. Like, it was, amazing and tough for them as well. Like, Brenton Phillips, first year coach, just won a premiership, and now he's got 20 of his players, going through an experience like that. So, hard to describe. It was, they did an amazing support for us. Like, I still think probably one of the best things we did, when we got back, may have been 3 or 4 months after, we all, when I say all of us, the guys who came back and survived Bali, we sat in a big room and had a bit of a round conversation, and for me, it was great to hear someone else say that they couldn't sleep, or that they sat themselves every time they heard a loud noise, because you realise you weren't the only one. And I do probably think we should have done more group stuff. They did lots of individual stuff, but to me, sitting with those boys and talking about it as a group, I think was more helpful for me, to know that I wasn't the only one going through these stupid things, which I thought, there's a couple now that we know are still struggling, and really, I think that's a pretty important point that would have helped. And I'm sure the club would agree with that now, and think things have changed a lot, I suppose, in 20 years around those sorts of things. But the club couldn't have done anything more than what they did, and very thankful for the support through that time.
Weathers, I remember ringing Sticks, when I was writing the article on you, and asking Sticks, how did you cope Bali? And Sticks' exact words back were, Rubel, you're not given a coaching manual how to deal with terrorism. And I thought, geez, that just nails it.
Yeah.
No, spot on. So it's it was probably may never happen again. I don't know. I really hope I hope to God it never happens again to any sporting club. But it was definitely part of Sturt's history now, and they still there's a the club is Sturt are named after Bobby, and there's a reserve medal named after Deegs. So it's I played a golf day every year for Deegs, and the Sturt Cricket Club and footy clubs played an annual game for Bobby. So and
I might point out,
it's amazing.
I might point out there, Pete, that Tim's probably the main driver of those functions too, and the reunion each year and all that. Tim drives the bus for it, which shows his character as well. So everyone supports it, and we just don't want it to ever be forgotten. Like, probably the one thing which I never get is you need to move on. That was one thing which we'll never move on through it, and we don't want to move on from it. And that's something which sometimes annoys me when people say that. That's probably the one comment I don't like. Or you need to move on from it, or it's bullshit.
Just get past it. Something which and I don't want to not remember it either. So
does it reignite when obviously it's brought up through the news? I mean, obviously we're talking about it here in a fairly open forum, but obviously on the news, somebody gets released that was part of that group. Does that bring up bad experiences for you guys, or is it like, no, let's just heal knowing that that's going on and we'll move on?
Yeah, no, every time I do think about it or it's in the media, it still definitely brings back pretty horrible memories. And I openly have cried and still do cry now about it. That's sometimes it gets me, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, it's funny that, isn't it?
It's one of those things. But I mean, I often talk about the story that when Amrosi, who was one of the main bombers, was in court, I had a cameraman follow me around for 12 hours because they wanted to see my reaction when he was sentenced.
Yep.
So the media was definitely all over it, and I was quite a big contact for it, and it was pretty tough during those early days for sure. But yeah, last year with the 20-year anniversary, probably was the most media had been on it for a long time, and yeah, that definitely. I actually travelled back over to Bali, which was great to go with my family, and I guess from now probably the thing that rocks me more is family and seeing them get emotional about it as well. So
Mate.
yeah, no, it will always be with me. It'll always affect me, and that's just my life, and that's fine.
Mate, you're only human. You're only human, and it's a totally natural response.
And I will say, Tim's wife, Marnie, is one of the great people of the world, and can't speak highly enough about Marnie either.
Yeah, no, it's well, that's like on that, I guess 20 years later, last year, got a little tattoo just below the heart there, just live life with no regrets, and that's probably how my standard line, I suppose, since then is. Now that's we both, me and Marnes, both think that same thing, that you just got to live life, and I have ever since then. I've probably a bit flippant with my money sometimes, but I never know what might happen tomorrow. So definitely, my life motto has been to live life with no regrets ever since.
Mate, thank you for sharing that with us. That's it's a unbelievable story, and we definitely won't be forgetting it. And thank you for sharing that with us tonight. But we've got to keep going with the footy. That's exactly right. I wanted to.
That's right. Let's move on.
Wanted to jump on that, but no, thank you for that. But obviously, a bit hard, obviously, with the premiership defence there, and the next year or so, playing off the bench became a bit frustrated.
Yeah, definitely. It was one of those for the next couple of years. It was, probably play. I was probably I felt close to my peak in that period. A few disappointments in regards to didn't get a state game. Didn't get drafted. Obviously when you're a kid playing footy, you want to play at the absolute highest level, and to not get that opportunity is probably one of my regrets in the end. And you can't do anything about that. But I would love to have played one game of AFL and not been good enough or whatever. But to not get an opportunity is always a little bit frustrating. And yeah, then I guess as the club changes, we went through a couple of coaches during that period, and I guess the game changed a bit as well. And I guess probably for me, the main changing of my career was probably when Rick McGowan came involved in the club, and he had a different pathway for the club, which is as a coach is his prerogative for sure. And I guess I probably wasn't in his eyes seen as part of his future. And the first year with Ricky, I played probably I think every game off the bench and got to the finals, and same sort of thing. I still felt I was contributing pretty well, and but yeah, just wasn't sure where I sat. And probably at the end of that season, spoke to Rick and said, I've had a pretty good career. I'm pretty happy where I'm at. Look, I'm thinking maybe, if you don't want me to continue on, maybe I'm better off retiring and moving on from now.
Mm-hmm.
And he encouraged me, no, we really want you to play and whatever. So I came back the following season and did the full pre-season and got to the first trial game, and he picked me in the reserves, and I hadn't played reserves for 16 years at that stage. I was, as you spoke about earlier, I was very lucky as a player. Injury-wise, I didn't miss games, and form-wise, I was pretty consistent. So from my league debut in 1995, I hadn't played a reserves game ever since. And not there was any issues with that. If I had to play reserves, I would have. But after that career, I was in my early 30s. I thought at that stage, look, I'd rather retire, as a league footballer. And what I'd done, I was quite proud of. So then I told the club at that time that, I felt I'd rather retire than to spend my last few years playing reserves footy. And so that was a really disappointing way to end the footy at Sturt. I'd always, like any kid, I think you want to play at the same club your whole life. I grew up as a Sturt person, and it wasn't to be for me, unfortunately. so then I was a bit lost. I'd done a full pre-season. Got myself nice and fit, ready to play footy, and I was at a bit of a loss. And so I ended up playing a game over at Tumby Bay, of all things.
That's right.
Little
Yep.
Michael Curtis, one of my
Yeah.
great mates, who's Tumby Bay lad, and he got me over there. And he always says I got caught holding the ball about 15 times that game because I was too slow, he reckons. But I tell him he was too slow to get the right spot. But wasn't the greatest game for me, but it was good fun. And yeah, then it ended up, as I said, didn't really know what I was going to do. I was still working in Adelaide and still loved my footy, and had a phone call, quite a random phone call from Jack Cale, who was down at South Adelaide in those times. And he sort of basically said to me, look, I'd love you to, he reckons I was still good enough to play league football. And, when someone like that says something like that to you, I think, oh, gee, that sounds good. And so I ended up having I organised to have a meeting with Jack the following Monday down at Glenelg. And I thought, if I'm going to do that, I want to have a bit of a look at who's playing for South. And so I went out to watch South Adelaide play North Adelaide, of all things, at Prospect. So I was standing in the outer, just watching those guys play, doing a bit of research, to have my meeting with South on the Monday. And the coach of Nord at the time, Trevor Hill, was standing in the outer. And I knew Trevor just through my work, through school sport. And he said, what are you doing here? And I sort of said, just sort of weighing up my future, whatever. And he said, well, would you be interested in coming to Nord? Just off the cuff. And so, without going into it, long story short.
I want to get involved here in a minute, Weathers.
Yeah, that's sort of the short of it, really. And yes, I was working at Prince Alfred College at the time, so Nord obviously similar sort of area to Sturt, similar sort of values I felt.
So at this stage, though, Pete,
but it's just so far away.
Yeah, and I'll get
club song's pretty close too.
Yeah, let's remember though, Weathers, we were doing Sapsaza together at this stage, and so he said
East Adelaide.
Yep. So which we did for a long time. We'll get to one of the wins on that as well during the next bit. But so he said, right, Rob, what's your thoughts here? Take your Nord hat off. And I said, yeah, well, South and that. But then I said, Weathers, you've effectively answered the question yourself with the travel point. And I left that night, and I'm thinking as I walked out towards my car at West Beach, I'm thinking, I reckon Weathers will sign for Nord tonight. Walked in the next morning, your first words were, hey, Rob, I signed for Nord last night.
I must say, I forgot about the old Sapsaza thing, but you're right, because I ended up having a photo at the Sapsaza training, didn't I?
Yes.
Nord jumper, so
yep.
with a couple of the boys. But so long story short, basically as a kid growing up, you just want to play league football, and to get told you had to stop, and then to get another opportunity, I thought, well, some people never get one opportunity to play league footy, and to me to get offered another opportunity anywhere, I think I would have taken it, because I just love playing so much. And I ended up being 3 of the greatest years of footy, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And Nord became a great club, and Marnie, myself and the family, we feel we can walk into both clubs, and are really proud of being involved with both those clubs, and they're both fantastic clubs to me. And those last 3 years at Nord were awesome.
It was funny. So there was a lot of publicity, ironically after Tim Geneva was the previous one.
Yes.
With we interviewed Tim last week, Weathers.
Okay, yeah.
With you playing your 300th. And now, normally on a Saturday morning, I was umpiring, you were coaching at Prince's, and the odd person would wish you luck, for a game, but it was still your release on a Saturday morning, school sport before playing.
I loved it. Yep.
But that Saturday morning, every single person from the opposition, every opposition, parents walking up, wishing you luck. And I'm just watching you, and you were towier than a Roman sandal. And I was pissing myself laughing. So I started to give you shit about the pink publicity and that in the week, just to try and get you to laugh a bit. And then back then, so the 299th game was against Sturt at Unley. And then so your 299th, I reckon I bought Lucy and Katie over to the rooms. And then your 300th, and it turned out Weathers ordered the weather that day because it rained against Port at Albany.
Perfect.
And as you were getting cheered off and the Nord crowd were chanting, Timmy, Timmy, I thought, geez, this is a huge tick for Weathers and Marnie, how quickly they've settled into the parade to be so accepted. And it was a little bit unusual because Sturt weren't playing that day, so Sturt was open for Sturt guys to come into the rooms, and
which is unusual in most cases.
So Bruce Lennon, there was Threaders. I'm trying to think who else.
Sheeds was there.
Sheeds, yeah, but they were all quite nervous. They were just standing by themselves and I went over to Beetle and said, "No, this is Weathers Day. Bugger this Nord Sturt bullshit. Get in there." And then I brought Lucy and Katie in. Lucy ran up with the lollies, and that sort of broke the ice as well. And then, of course, that 300th that night was the Nord auction as well. So it became a Nord auction T Weatherald 300th night. And the Sturt guys, to their credit, bought a table, and I thought that was fantastic that night as well, Weathers.
No, as I said, like they're both great clubs. You obviously. Yeah, you're always competitors on the field, and I definitely didn't ask those boys to do that, and that was real. I was really tickle pink to have that support from those boys who I played. Obviously played, over 250 games, probably 200 games with some of them individually.
Yeah.
So that was amazing. That game down at Port Adelaide, and we had a good win down there, which was always nice. And as you said, it was nice and wet, so the ball was on the ground plenty of times for me to get a few sneaky kicks and kick it 20 metres. But
I think Brian the doorman was a bit confused with who was coming in the door, and no, they're allowed in today, right?
He wasn't going to let them in.
No, he wasn't going to let those Sturt pricks in, no.
But that was. You talk about memories and of when you finish off in there. That was definitely up there with one of the best playing that 300th.
Yeah,
and
great day.
Yeah, I think the way that footy's going, there may not be too many who get to play 300.
There won't be another
South.
There won't be another SNFL player.
Yep.
So
hope there is, but I don't think there will be. So the era under Bass at Nord.
Yep.
Go for it.
Yep. Yeah, well, obviously, I mean, I knew, as we spoke about earlier in the chat, like I knew Bass through cricket and crossed paths just through having kids and whatever. And so my first year at Nord was with Trev. That was, we
and again, you didn't play a reserves game either, Weathers.
No, I picked in the reserves to play my first game.
I'd heard that.
And
Gags
did a hammy, didn't he?
Gallagher did his hammy, the old bugger. So I do mention that to Gags every now and then. But so then I got thrown straight into the team to play North at Prospect first game, and so talking about the reserves thing, so I never actually ended up playing a reserves game at Nord either. Just was able to sort of sneak in, and that was, I think it was about round 6 or 7, I think.
Yep.
Was that game, and we ended up having a great year, and a young Taylor Walker was a pretty handy player during those periods, and we snuck through into the finals, and we beat Port in that elimination final, which I think was the first time Nord had won a final you'd be able to know better than me, Malky, but I don't think they had won a final for a few years.
Yeah.
And, so that was my first year there, and then Freddie Nathan Bassett came in, and I'd never seen structure in football like that before in my life, to be honest.
Yeah.
And but in saying all that, that probably allowed me to play another couple of years because you just got to play shorter periods on the field, and he managed that really well. And he sort of trusted me a lot too, which is great. He didn't expect me to change my style of footy, and whatever, he sort of worked my style into his style, I suppose. And I thought it worked really well, and obviously it did for that period. And we had a great sort of couple of years. Well, great. I only had the 1 year with him, but it would have been the dream way to finish a year. I would love to have probably played it. It was one of those things as a person, at the end of that year when plenty of footy guys have been to that period where I love playing the games, but it's starting to get hard to get the training. You just sort of thought, if I go one more year, will I end up struggling and not be at the standard? So, and then throw in twins early being born the following year. I thought, geez, I don't know if I can do another year like this with 4 kids under 5. I probably haven't got the real joy as much as I needed. And I always wanted to make sure I made that decision after the experience at Sturt to stop when it was my decision. So again, no regrets. I made the right call when I did. But you could just see that Bass had those boys flying, and I knew they'd win a few flags in the upcoming years, and yeah, I just couldn't hang on any longer to get there. So
And
had one great year with Bass. Nearly got there, as I said, that beat the Eagles in that prelim, and coming home against Central and nearly getting there and hit that bloody post on my last ever kick, which I'm sure you still talk about, Malky.
No, I was about to bring that up. Yes.
I knew you were going to bring it up, so I thought I'd bring it up.
Yes.
And Bass is an amazing coach, and obviously great to see him being successful now. And I still run into him, at the girls' netball. I've seen him coaching netball of all things, Bass too. So he just loves it. So great fella.
Yeah. So that Pete, so Weathers has had a ping, and it was probably the longest kick of his career as well. And it really looked like it was going through, and it just swung away at the last split second to hit the post.
Paul Popolo was the bloke, Malky. Like, so I'd launched one. I keep saying it's about 65, but maybe even 70, I reckon now. But, James Gallagher handballed it out the back to me, and we were 7 points down at the time, and like you, and I think like most people, and it looked like it was going through. And Paul Popolo, he had a pretty fair career after that game. He went to market and actually pulled his hands away, and it hit the padding of the post.
Yeah.
Bloody football park had too big a post back then, I reckon. I still blame that. But anyway, long story short, hit the post and put us 6 points down, and then the siren went probably 30, 40 seconds later.
Gunston marked the kick out. Yeah. Playing for Central. So out of that, though, Pete, I probably spent a fair bit of time with Marnie and the girls that night, and may have made my thoughts known about the ball hitting the post. And I think it might have been Katie the next morning has repeated what I'd said. And Marnie immediately yelled, Malcolm. At least she didn't blame you. She knew it was me straight away with us, so that was something at least.
You can't get away with anything there, Malcolm.
No. And so, too, there was one other funny moment, Pete, where Weathers has already had the two girls. Marnie's pregnant with twins. We've kept stirring Weathers up. It's going to be two more girls. And Weathers' text message, we'll change a little bit of it, Tim, was...
let it all out.
All you bastards are correct. Yep, two more girls. How much do effing weddings cost?
Yeah. So, yeah. So, no. So, yeah, it was one of those stories. And, four girls. Wouldn't change anything now, but, yeah, at the time. And I still do cop a fair bit about it. But I keep telling it's because I'm an elite athlete. It's not
That's right.
But, that's always my comeback.
Oh well, it's true with the girls.
Mate,
So,
you'll have to put another bathroom on when they get a bit older. That's for sure.
I'm building myself a new house at the moment. I don't think I've ever had to build a house based around four girls. You don't know how much time they spend in the bloody bathroom and how many clothes they have. You should see how much storage I've had to build.
I thought you'd finished that house by now with us.
Well, I'm still trying to build the storage.
Oh, that's fair enough. Yeah, that's all right.
I'm a couple of weeks out now, so I'm nearly there.
So
walk-in robes, you got to have plenty of them for the women.
Definitely.
So, Tim, since footy, you coached, helped out with the Nord reserves and all that, and then eventually probably you're coaching, and you were obviously coaching at Prince's, but you decided to move to Darwin and ended up pretty heavily involved with women's footy. And
it was one of those things. So I obviously helped Nord for a while and ended up actually going to North Adelaide. Josh Franco.
Right. I was trying to think. Yep.
After his obviously footy career, he sort of moved into teaching. So he actually came and worked with me at PAC of all places. And during that period, that he just obviously was only there for maybe a year, I reckon. Then he got the job as a senior coach in North Adelaide and offered me to come and help him. And he said, "Oh, would you like to do that? Or there's actually the under 18 roles available too. You can still work with me." And I sort of was keen to take on my own team at that stage. So, moved into North Adelaide and coached their under-18s for a couple of years. And that was probably when I sort of first started taking the footy a little bit serious and as a coach, and loved working with Josh that season. And at North Adelaide, did a couple of years there. And, and then, as Malky mentioned, ended up probably as much of a life change as it wasn't necessarily for football. It was, I'd worked at PAC for a long time and lived in Adelaide, and we just wanted to live as a family in another state. And Darwin was a good fit for us. I had some family up there, and Jake's dad of all places lived in Darwin, and obviously other states you could go to, but you don't have the footy. Whereas Darwin, I knew had some footy. I could still do some coaching and teach and live a great life. And yeah, so headed up to Darwin, coached footy for a little bit, and that was during the period where I guess AFLW was starting to take off, I suppose, and through the affiliation with the NT in South Australia, that first few years of the footy was
that's
right. It was the Crows and NT girls team was fun. That was sort of how the Crows was founded, I suppose. And I was working with some of the Crows girls up in Darwin, and very, very smart, I guess, by the Crows in those early days. They wanted their girls to play more games of footy together. So with that affiliation, they formed this team called the NT Thunder, and we played a women's team in the VFL. And I was sort of, approached to be the head coach of that. So I ended up coaching that team. So each week I'd sort of coach the Darwin-based Crows girls and some Darwin girls. And in Adelaide, Peter Cave and Andrew McLeod at that stage were coaching the Crows girls, and we'd fly into Melbourne on a Friday night. There'd be 5 or 6 of the Crows girls and me and my Darwin crew, and we get together on a Friday night, then we'd play in the VFL on that Saturday. And it was an amazing experience to do that. And, long story, a couple of years later, I moved back to Adelaide, and, I stayed involved with that Crows women's side, and Maddie Clark took over the team in that year. And that was the year when sort of went through, won the premiership, played in that amazing game at Adelaide Oval with that 50,000 plus crowd. So, yeah, to be involved on that day was a great experience. And, I guess that was almost when the women's football really took off. And having 4 daughters myself who obviously love sport, and, they all love their footy. And
there's pathways there now for them, isn't there?
And there's legitimate pathways for them. And I guess through that period there, after the Crows, I was working down at Westminster School coaching their first 18s. I didn't really have the time to put into that role fully. And you got offered the opportunity through Robbie Neal, another great Nord man,
great man,
to work with the state under-18 girls team. And so for the last 4 years, I've coached that team, and obviously had a few issues with COVID and missed out a few carnivals and stuff. But that was sort of, about only really a 3-month program through January through to April, and I was able to do that and work with these amazingly talented young girls, and then still coach at Westminster without too much of an issue. And yeah, so I've done that for the last 4 years, and some amazing experiences just to see the development of the girls. That first year I did it to where we were last year when I finished. You just can't compare how much talent's coming through. And really enjoyed that part of life as well. And last year, obviously, like any good South Australian person, you like to beat the Victorians, and we beat Victoria ended up being the grand final for the national championships last year. And as a coach, that was pretty nice. To do that and sort of get named as the All-Australian coach was a great honour for me last year in that women's space. And unfortunately, they've changed the program a bit this year, and it just doesn't fit with the school footy. So I've had to sort of put that aside. So just coaching at Westminster now in the first 18 there, which is also great fun, but also helping coach my little twin girls. They're 12. Yes. They're playing out at the Marion Rams. So I help coach out there, and my 2 older girls are playing at the Glenunga Rams, so in the under-17 girls. So I still stay involved with the girls' footy, but not at that sort of that state level, which was really thrilling for a few years.
Absolutely.
So Tim and I think we did SAPSARS together for about around about the 8 years and all that. So we did. It's funny.
The old East Adelaide team.
Yes, and I reckon out of that too, Weathers, every year we did it, we never had a discussion over who'd be captain. We always just walked towards each other and nodded. And the year with Luke Valenti, I think our first training was at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday, and I reckon it was about 4:07 that we appointed him captain. And he was incredible. Every other year, I still generally did the warm-up. With Luke, we just let him go and let him do everything. And we
true leader, wasn't he? Yeah.
Oh, he's incredible. And we won that year, and let's be honest, Weathers and I were as pumped as the kids were.
Yep, definitely. We loved it. Like, and Lukey, I think it was the only year we ever had a post-match celebration as well. That he organised that for us too. So, he was great. But I'm actually talking about that, Mac. I'm back involved in the SAPSARS as well. So I'm now coaching their little Southwest team.
I reckon I might
Yeah.
I might volunteer to help you with that one. I reckon you need a runner. So, we will have a
do
chat.
that now. So,
Yes.
the last couple of years I've done that, and I've won it back to back. So my little Southwest crew's been pretty good. So,
All right, I'd love to get involved.
Beautiful. We'll keep you in mind next year.
Yes, and so with that, and to the next year after we'd won it, we lost the first game of the carnival where a player missed in the goal square with the last kick of the game to win us the game. And Weathers and I just nodded towards it.
It happens.
Sort of thing.
Yep.
Then we kept
Little
winning.
bastard.
Yeah. Then we kept winning the rest of the week, right? And on the Thursday night, this particular youngster, young Perks, walks towards, goes and asks his mum, "Have I cost us the championship?" She replied with, "Do you want the mummy still loves you line or the truth?" That's still always one of my favourite ever footy lines. So.
Very funny. But, again, another great experience as a coach to coach those young boys as well, the little 11, 12-year-old kids. And, they love their footy, and that's always a great week to go and do that. And that was only probably 2 weeks ago. Still a great memory. And, from that period like a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I should have put my hand up earlier. So Weathers then, so summing up, let's go through your hardest opponents.
Yeah, I mean, Brett James in the early days when I was playing at Seth, he was a great opponent. Ian Callanan in the middle of those centrals, great.
Yeah.
He was a great player, and he cost us that grand final my last game.
Yeah.
Actually, he was as a player, but he also cleaned up Flipper
Yes,
as well.
yes.
But he was a very, very good
Very
player.
good player.
Jeremy Clayton probably won, but I found him when he was at Port Adelaide to be a really, for a little fella, he's such a strong overhead mark, and so they're three off the top of my head. Who really guys that played regularly as well, like Cigalella was a great player through that period when I was playing as well, and I saw the Gowans boys plenty of times, and they were tough and very talented players too. So lots of one-off players, guys coming back through the AFL who you stood every now and then, and but those ones who you played regularly, you always knew you're up for a tough game against those guys.
What about favourite teammate? Too many. I know.
Me and I was Batman. Well, I was Robin, and Ben Nelson was Batman for a long period there. So Benny Nelson, we played as kids as well. So he obviously moved to Carlton for a little bit in the Crows, but he was always a great teammate of mine. Probably, obviously we had a really good core group of players. I've sort of mentioned a few of them. Your Brodie Atkinson was great when he came over, and Damien Squire. I mentioned Bruce Lennon, Andrew Geddes, Chris Threadgold, an amazing captain, leader, and great person around the club. Andrew Geddes, just some great players. Pure talent. I reckon the most talented I played was Damien Squire. He was a freak. He was
lethal left leg.
Lethal, yeah. He's won three McGarrys. Could have played a lot more AFL, like I'm sure a lot of people say. But he was a great teammate to have in your team as well.
Now, I reckon Weathers, we'd both be shot if we didn't give a certain person who's a huge influence and the lover of the Weatherald family and Emma Jade Haynes a mention, mate. We'd both be in trouble.
Yeah, I know. She'll hear about this.
Yes.
She messaged me today. So Emma, she's a great lady, great Nord person, and me and Marnie are actually really honoured. We were named to be a godparents to one of her recent set of twins, and
yes.
Yeah, so still great family people, and I know her oldest daughter's at the State of Origin tonight. So, make sure Emma, she's a ripper.
We'll tag her in the
no,
promotion for this.
Don't worry, we'll do that.
Absolutely.
No, don't worry, we'll do that. Look, Tim, privileged to have you on board. As I said, been involved with you for a long time, and that remember also that umpiring bit down at Prince's where you wonder what the hell I was doing at 3/4 time, and I ran to my car and got a shovel out and dug.
That was very concerning.
And ran back to the middle because a duck had worked its way to the surface, a dead duck.
Oh, no.
And I said to Weathers, well, I reckon I'm probably the only person here who would have had a shovel in the car. And he said, yeah, that's a fair point. So, Yes.
That's a beauty.
Yes. So, really rapt to have you on board with us. And thanks, Marnie, for her friendship over the years as well. Thanks, mate.
No, thanks very much for the invite, guys. It's always great to talk footy, and I never grow tired of talking about it. So great to hear from you, lads, and all the best and good luck with the show.
Thank you very much, Timmy. Much appreciated, mate.
Cheers, guys.
See you, mate.
See ya.
And, mate, we've just been speaking with Timmy, and obviously early on in his footy career was starved of a little bit of success, but ultimately got the success in 2002 and then didn't get to celebrate it like most premiership players would. And, wow, what a story about the Bali bombings.
Yeah, look, I admit it's something I struggle
to
talk about.
I was welling up myself going, this is just an amazing story, and just to hear it is just crazy.
There's other things which can't come out, and it's still amazing.
We talk about the mental health space quite a bit on this program, and 20 years on, even Timmy's sort of saying that it's something that they don't want to forget, but they aren't going to move on from, unfortunately, and it's a tragedy that shouldn't have really happened.
Yep.
Timmy's career, obviously finishing up at Norwood and under Bass and Trevor Hill cutting John Cale's lunch was an interesting story that I'd actually didn't know. So that was a bit of fun towards the end there as well.
Yeah, look, at his 300th, I'll be on. That was pretty special. That there I was to take his kids in the rooms as well. So I had his kids on the boundary line, and so obviously a pretty big connection with Tim, and I was probably his main connection with Norwood.
Yes,
or one of. He obviously still knew his guys at Norwood as well, and so that was. Pretty special. And, just 2010, we were a breath away.
Absolutely.
In this crazy world we live in, we all need the distraction. Enjoying the show? Like, rate, and subscribe. Hook up and connect with us on social media at Sportscast SA. We'll see you next time on Game On.